Tanks, properly employed, can be war winners. Badly employed, steel coffins and scrap metal. The death of the tank has been predicted and exaggerated. There is no substitute for the tank on today's battlefields. Mobility, protection and firepower. It's the holy trinity of the modern tank, and it's the design compromise which can prevail or not. So join me, Jan Darasz, for how we got here.
Few innovations have reshaped the battlefield as much as the tank. These colossal machines of war, with their imposing presence and formidable firepower, have left a permanent mark on history, forever changing the way war is waged. The birth of the modern tank can be traced back to World War I, when the stalemate of trench warfare demanded a new approach. The introduction of the British Mark I tank in 1916 heralded a new era of armoured warfare. These early tanks, though primitive by today's standards, made breaching enemy lines easier than ever before. Tank tracks allowed the vehicles to be driven on nearly every type of terrain, which made it possible to outmaneuver the enemy quickly and efficiently. World War II saw the tank's role evolve even further, with armoured divisions becoming the vanguard of most armies. Improvements such as sloped armour, more powerful cannons, and improved mobility transformed tanks into highly effective weapons, capable of winning battles on their own. German Panzers, Soviet T-34s, and American Shermans became iconic symbols of the era, dominating battlefields from the deserts of North Africa to the fields of Normandy. However, as warfare progressed into the modern era, the role of tanks began to face new challenges. The rise of precision-guided munitions, drone warfare, and asymmetric threats made tanks less reliable than before. Unmanned aerial vehicles in particular have emerged as potent tools for reconnaissance, surveillance, and precision strikes. The flexibility of these drones would see tanks shift to the role of mobile infantry support. Modern tanks boast advanced technologies such as composite and reactive armor and digital battlefield management systems. They are also equipped with sophisticated fire control systems and networked communications, enhancing their accuracy and lethality. And while UAVs offer unparalleled aerial reconnaissance and precision strike capabilities, tanks provide ground forces with crucial armored support and firepower. Their ability to operate in complex terrain and withstand direct enemy fire remains unmatched by aerial weaponry. Their unparalleled resilience to damage makes them ideal tools for spearheading any ground operations. And with Russia and NATO member states deciding to suspend the implementation of the Treaty on Conventional Armed Forces in Europe, the number of tanks on either side is not only not restricted, but also not monitored.
I'm delighted to welcome our guest, Damian Radka. He's the senior editor at Defence 24 portal. So welcome to the programme once more.
Hello, sir.
Last time we discussed the god of war, the artillery, and in particular the 155 millimeter shell, which is the go-to shell in the Russo-Ukrainian war today. We're going to be discussing the tank and its position and its value. A couple of years ago, everybody was seemingly predicting the death of the tank, the obsolescence of the tank, because of the anti-tank guided weapons, the javelins, the NLAWs, that kind of thing, the drones. But the death of the tank has been predicted ever since it first appeared on the battlefield.
Yes, this is correct. During First World War, there were people that said that the tanks are just toys. They are not useful. They should not be produced and used. This is a very false prediction, and it is repeated time over time over time. This is because the tank is misunderstood by general public. People often misunderstood even the term survivability. Survivability do not mean that the vehicle is indestructible. The tank was never indestructible, and it was never designed to be indestructible. It is impossible to design indestructible weapon systems. However, tank is meant to be survivable on the battlefield. So it is meant to survive long enough to destroy the enemy, to accomplish its mission, and well-designed tank provides primary survivability for its crew. So the vehicle can be damaged, can be destroyed, but it is the crew that needs to survive. The crew is the crucial part of the vehicle. And the better trained the crew, the more experienced the crew, the more important it is. So, for example, we see in Ukraine that the Western vehicles provide much greater survivability for its crews than the Soviet designs and Russian designs that evolved from them. So this is a very important thing to understand. Obviously, in 1973, after Yom Kippur War, there was that shock with anti-tank guided missiles. Again, prediction that this is the death of the tank. Well, tanks are also evolving. This is another misconception about the tanks, because what I see, general public see tanks like they were in the Second World War, that they never changed from that, but they changed a lot. Armor is not just pure steel today. This is a composite armor. Most often it have a modular design. Specialists even say that modern armor can be tuned, so it can be modified. It's not only that these large modules of armor can be easily or relatively easily replaced, upgraded, but armor itself is made from smaller modules, so it can be tuned for specific threats, for be heavier, more protection, or be lighter, less protection, or can be even tuned to be for export. So our army have a better armor, and for export is slightly worse.
The lessons from the first battle, the employment of the British tanks in Cambrai in 1917, was that it was seen as a partial success or partial failure? Was that because of the tanks? The problem with tanks is to employ them correctly rather than just go forward and assume that the tank is invincible, as you said.
Yes, every weapon system must be used properly. Properly, it means that the crew must be proficient in using it, but it also needs to understand its strong sides and its limitations. There are no weapon systems that have no limitations. The same can be applied to aircraft, to helicopters, even artillery. So knowing limitations mitigates the problems on the battlefield. So the commanders need to know where the vehicles can go, where they can't go. Terrain is very important. It is very important also to know that the vehicle is not invincible. Armor gives chances to survive, but the enemy here is physics. We cannot armor vehicle from every aspect in the same way. So the strongest armor is on the front. If we would put frontal protection on sides, on the rear, on the top, then the vehicles would be extremely large and extremely heavy. So this is impractical. Especially today, where composite armor have an extreme thickness. In some cases, frontal turret armor of some tanks have a thickness around 1 meter. So this is extremely thick armor. So these are the limitations. Of course, vehicles have also their strong sides. The main battle tank, why it was not replaced by any other weapon system? This is because the main battle tank is a perfect balance of protection, firepower, and mobility. Some people might say, okay, so why, for example, not infantry fighting vehicle? Why not arm infantry fighting vehicle with a tank cannon, give it tank armor, and it can also carry infantry squad for its protection and support? This is again because of physics. The tanks have a very small internal volume, so they are very efficient designs. They can be relatively lightweight. This is a bad word. They can have optimal weight for their protection, and they can have good mobility and good firepower because its crew is small. It's 4 or 3 people.
But you touched also on this idea of the survivability of the crew. The better trained the crew, the more chances of survival it has. Does this reflect 2 philosophies of armour? One is the quality, the Western way, the German way during the Second World War, for example, and the Russian way, which is quantity on the Eastern Front.
This is a more complex problem because, yes, the training is...
Quantity has a quality of its own.
Yes. This is a very complicated subject, but I try to elaborate on it. On the one side, the training is very crucial. better trained crews have better survivability. However, there is also the technical aspect. And we can say that, yes, for example, Western vehicles are of better quality in general. However, this is more complex because most people do not understand what kills the tank and its crew. This is not the enemy projectile, not in a direct way. Because especially today when the armor is so good, the projectiles that are meant to pierce it must focus a lot of energy on a very small area. So even if the armor is pierced, most often the crew survives because there are only some fragments that are wounding them. But
the energy is dissipated.
Energy is dissipated, and also because, for example, shaped charge jet. So shaped charge jet have a diameter of pencil, for example. So if it goes through the armor, if you are not in its direct pathway, you will probably survive. You can be wounded, but you will probably survive. The problem is the vehicle's own ammunition stored inside, especially propellant charges, because propellant charges are chemicals that have their own oxidizer, and they can burn even underwater. So it is impossible to extinguish them. So what is the solution here? Fortunately and unfortunately, only one nation implemented that solution. The solution is simple, so it's surprising that other nations did not implement it or implemented it only partially. This is isolated ammunition storage with so-called blow-off panels. So the ammunition is behind armored bulkhead, and on top of the ammunition magazine, there are so-called blow-off panels. These are armor panels that are only bolted with bolts, specially designed bolts. So if ammunition starts to burn, pressure is increasing in such magazine. It blows these panels, and all that flames, energy, gases are released outside of vehicle and outside of the crew.
So that's a technical resolution to a problem. Yes. What would you say is the chief failure of the Ukrainians to punch through the Russian lines? Is it kind of like a repeat of the Battle of Kursk, for example, when the Germans tried to punch through successive Russian Soviet defense lines? Was it that, or were there other factors involved?
This is also a very complex matter. Right now, I believe, and I think a lot of analysts in the world believe, that there is only one army that is capable of breaching through such kind of defense systems. This is the US Army. But this is because US Army have a lot of organic artillery support, both gun artillery and missile artillery, and also because it have a support of the most powerful air forces in the world, the US Air Force. Without that, breaching such defense lines is very difficult, if not impossible task. And Russians are definitely experts in creating defense lines.
So a Viking line, yes.
Yes, for example. So this is one of the aspects why the Ukrainians have a failure here. The other aspect is that in my opinion, I might be wrong, but in my opinion and from what I observed, Ukrainian counteroffensive was too hasty, not prepared well, but this is not the fault of the Ukrainian general staff. This is because there was no time and there were limited resources to do that. So the problem of preparation. Another problem was, I think, political, because there was a large pressure from politicians to make that counteroffensive. And politicians were kind of constantly talking where the offensive will happen. So they give Russians capability to prepare properly and time. And I think it was General Zaluzhny who said that either he will start counteroffensive immediately without huge preparations, without waiting for the Western equipment, but when there were no prepared defensive lines. And I think he was right back then.
Yeah. What's the, so it's command, political unpreparedness. What's the future of the armour the armoured forces in this particular sector of the Ukrainian front. When Russia invaded a couple of years ago, it was generally accepted that southern Ukraine was ideal tank country. And now it seems to have solidified into a kind of First World War situation. Is there any future for tanks on this particular sector?
I believe so, and Ukrainian soldiers believe so. Without attacking without armor support is very difficult. It's very dangerous for the infantry. This is because armored vehicles are magnets for the bullets. It might be counterintuitive for most people, but because of that, the armored vehicle is designed to survive that, have a high survivability. Of course, sometimes it's destroyed or damaged, but in general have a high survivability. Infantry soldiers, not so.
Yes.
So, presence of the armored vehicles and fire support that they're providing often save lives of the infantry. Of course, situations on the real battlefield are not always ideal, but fighting without armor support, it's like the meat assaults, as the Russians call them even, of the Russian army. Huge losses of the infantry, a lot of wounded, often with amputated limbs. So it's suboptimal. Of course, Ukraine also have problems. They have problems with training. We need to remember one thing. Ukrainian army is fighting with a enemy with superior numbers for 3 years right now.
Yes, and the Russians have made up their tank losses.
Yes, this is one problem. But we need to remember that Ukrainian army of today is not Ukrainian army from 2022 or first half of 2023. They also have losses, especially in men. Experienced soldiers, experienced commanders. Many of them are unfortunately fallen or are wounded and cannot fight anymore. And we talk here not only about physical wounds, but also psychological wounds. This is a huge problem, and you will definitely ask for lessons learned from that. And for example, here in Poland, General Klisz talk about this often. NATO cannot go the way the Ukrainians went. So we cannot let war to be so static. War must be maneuverable, because maneuver is also survivability. And a lot of American commanders, other NATO nations commanders, always emphasize this. We need to be maneuverable to be survivable. Being in static trenches means huge losses.
And the tank is the maneuver vehicle par excellence, isn't it? Final question to you. What's the future of the tank? It's been around since the First World War. Turret, gun, tracked or vehicle. Drone, remote control tanks, this sort of thing. Is that how do you see the tank developing in the next few years?
I will start like this. All serious nations around the world are investing a lot in armored vehicles, including main battle tanks. US Army is here a good example. If you will check their documents that are publicly available, there is a lot of investment, not only in procuring vehicles, but also developing new types and developing new technologies. How the tank will look like? It will not be unmanned. There were experiments conducted with unmanned vehicles, and there were several conclusions. While the flying drones are quite easy to create and control, ground vehicles are a different matter. The ground is more complex terrain than air. So this is one problem. Second problem is reaction time. Manned vehicles have a much quicker reaction time than unmanned vehicles. Yeah. Communication systems, they can be jammed. So unmanned vehicle is useless if it's jammed. And one more interesting conclusion was that, okay, we can make unmanned tank. It will be just as expensive or even more expensive than manned tank. So it will need to be survivable. So again, it will need armor, it will need other solutions to improve its survivability. So, at least right now and in foreseeable future, unmanned ground vehicles will be rather small support vehicles, not the main combat ones. So this is one aspect. Second aspect, improving survivability. Here is the problem with physics again. So we cannot just add more and more armor. The vehicle will be too big, too heavy. But we need to keep good armor protection. So how to do it? We will probably go in that direction, like for example T-14 Armata shows. So entire crew in the hull, in front, in armored capsule, protected with the heaviest armor. Rest of vehicle will have lighter armor, and on top of that will be unmanned lightweight turret. Armor will be supplemented with active protection systems, both soft kill and hard kill systems. Soft kill are mostly different kind of jammers, smoke grenades, that kind of design solutions. Hard kill systems are more advanced. They're designed to detect, track, and intercept incoming projectiles, destroying them. So active protection is very important.
Unfortunately, we have to draw our discussion to a close, but thank you very much, Damian Radka, for coming onto the programme. Fascinating discussion about the tank.
Thank you very much.
That's great. We've run out of time as usual, so join us next time for How We Got Here.